Hey everyone, we've got an absolutely fascinating explainer for you today. We're going to be exploring a framework called SETCO, the Systematic, Epistemic, Theological, Computational Ontology. Now I know that is quite a mouthful, but stick with me here. This is a breathtakingly ambitious piece of source material. It bridges the gap between computation, pure geometry, theology, and literally physical reality itself. At its core, it's all about how meaning is formed, preserved, and structurally understood. Here's our roadmap for the day. We're going to hit the authority collapse problem, define the SESCO framework, look at the geometry of meaning, and then chart the path from opinion to intelligence. After that, we'll hit the sevenfold creation path and wrap up with unifying computation and physics. Sounds good? Let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this first section, the authority collapse problem. Basically, why modern computation is so confused right now. So before we can talk about building universes, we got to talk about why our current digital systems are fundamentally, confused. The source text identifies what it calls the root problem. Modern computation is constantly mixing up incompatible surfaces of authority. Think about it, like treating a rough architectural sketch as the actual load-bearing foundation. You're going to have a that time. We've got category collapse everywhere. A system might treat a basic test like it's an absolute mathematical proof, or it treats a compiler as the ultimate source of truth, or a metaphor as literal canon. The framework points out that before any system can decide what's true or executable, it literally has to know what kind of thing it's looking at first. When everything is just collapsed together, you get total authority confusion. Which brings us to Section 2, defining the SETCO framework, or distinction before authority. Enter SETCO. Let's unpack that massive acronym: Systematic, Epistemic, Theological, Computational Ontology. SETCO is an independent transition framework. Its whole job is to let computational environments understand, classify, and stage information before they try to decide if it has any authority. And I really want to emphasize something the source makes crystal clear here. SETCO doesn't create truth or authority itself. Not at all. It just prevents that authority confusion we were just talking about. It asks, where does this idea belong, way before it ever asks, is this idea true? And this brilliantly illustrates the boundary we're dealing with. On the left side, we've got SETCO, that transition framework categorizing and staging claims. And then on the right, we've got OMI, the pure object model. OMI is the actual target. It's the pure base where the declarations live. So SETCO is essentially acting like an adapter, organizing all the chaos of modern environments so they can interact with the pure OMI model without accidentally overriding it or suddenly acting like the authority themselves. Section 3, the geometry of meaning. Let's visualize this classification. So how exactly does SETCO categorize all these chaotic concepts? Well, it shifts gears into what the source calls primitive geometric normalization. This table lays out the SETCO mental boundary mnemonic. It's a really cool way to classify an idea so it doesn't fall into the wrong category. See how an idea can be classified as a geometric node, which computationally holds state and grammatically acts as a noun? Or it could be an edge, driving a computational transform and acting as a verb. Or even a face, representing a phase and forming a complete sentence. By locking ideas into these strict geometric constraints, SETCO literally stops category collapse right at the front door. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is just how deep this geometry actually goes. We're looking at the root pair here, center minus relation and center plus relation. The source material traces this all the way back to the theological first principles, this concept of God in the void making the very first distinction, the word creating the first boundary. In computational terms, this forms the first reversible resolver cell. The center declares, the radius relates, and boom, a boundary is born. And from that single root pair, the framework scales all the way up what it calls the incidence ladder. It builds up from that initial zero-sphere boundary, scaling to a 4-point tetrahedral grammar, then a 7-point creation incidence, an 8-point octanion in space, and it goes all the way up to a 12-point tribe contact field. The text actually describes this highest level beautifully as kissing spheres of agreement and difference. It basically represents the maximum number of distinct views that can touch each other in agreement without collapsing into one forced single viewpoint. Section 4, from opinion to intelligence, looking at the human witness path. So all this geometry is super fascinating, but how does it apply to evaluating actual truth? That brings us to a radical redefinition of moving from IMO to OMI. Normally, when we hear "in my opinion," we think of something kind of weak or dismissible, right? But the source completely flips that. IMO is redefined as the honest, local frame of a human witness who notices a pattern before they can formally prove it. On my intelligence, or OMI, is when that relation becomes inspectable and accountable. So the crucial point is that OMI achieves this without demanding some massive central authority. Instead, bounded shards of intelligence are exchanged peer-to-peer. Check out this quote. The path from IMO to OMI is the path from local opinion to accountable intelligence. I just love that line. It highlights a really profound philosophy embedded in the text, protecting human testimony. By moving from IMO to OMI, partial witnesses can reconstruct meaning and verify their own local uniqueness. And they can do it without a platform forcing a single global semantic operation onto everybody. You literally don't have to own the entire semantic world just to share a valid piece of intelligence. Section 5. The Sevenfold Creation Path. Let's move to and see how this builds into an actual methodology. What you're seeing here is what the framework calls the sevenfold path. It's a very deliberate, direct sequence showing exactly how a declared word evolves into a fully reusable computational construct. Let's walk through these steps because they're absolutely crucial. First up, declaration, simply placing a value into a bounded frame. Then, citation, makes it referable. After that, assertion turns that cited value into a claim, and attestation gives a receipt for it. Then we get to observation, where others can choose to inspect it or just ignore it entirely. Annotation comes next, where another view creates a relation. Finally, agreement happens when contradiction is resolved just enough to keep going, and boom, a construct is born. That's a reusable shape of those resolved views. The author is super explicit here. This path exists so platforms absolutely cannot own testimony, and coercion can't masquerade as agreement. Meaning requires consent literally every step of the way. And our final section, unifying computation and physics. This is the OMI standard model. Okay, let's scale this up to the grandest implication of the whole SETSCO framework. If this ontology perfectly maps meaning, geometry, and computation, what about physical reality itself? The source material makes an absolutely awe-inspiring claim here. It maps its computational ontology directly onto the standard model of particle physics. Just look at this alignment for a second. The zero sphere aligns with spin 1/2. The 7-point phonoplane lines up perfectly with the 3 generations of matter. The tetrahedral grammar maps to the 4 fundamental forces. The delta law matches SU3 symmetry. And the omnicron runtime, that maps to space-time itself. The framework imparts that physics isn't some totally separate discovery. It's actually a special, emergent case of this exact same ontological structure. The text concludes with this staggering thought. Physics is the emergent behavior of relation, boundary, and closure at the level of matter. Basically, according to the source, the standard model of physics is just the shadow of the OMI computational ontology playing itself out in the physical world. Mind-blowing, right? And that leaves us with a truly provocative question to wrap up our explainer today. If creation is the word becoming form, step by step, boundary by boundary, are our computations just the shadows of a deeper physics? Or is physics actually the ultimate computation? It's a wild, multidisciplinary journey that really forces us to re-examine the depths of our own systems. Thank you so much for exploring SETCO with me today, and I'll catch you next time.